and you're bent over at the waist. And I don't think Eric's going to be pleased with that. Here you see he gets a good jump, and he's spinning nice and strong. He just did not quite have enough time, came out a little bit too soon to look for the water. As you see, he had his head up looking for the water when he should have been looking down.
Well, the replay can really help on this. Paul STABROWSKI, a junior from Arkansas.
Speaking of replay, a lot of times divers have wished that the judges have had
yeah,
instant replay.
Now, this seems like he's going to be doing, this is a little unusual dive start from what we've seen so far.
This is an arm stand. Now, he will kick up into an arm stand, and he has to hold it for 3 seconds. And the judges are going to have to take off of that because he did not hold that arm stand.
Yeah.
What the judges will look for is control in that arm stand position.
5.
Let's take a look at it again and again.
Okay, now you see he jumps up into his handstand. He's afraid he's going to bring his feet back down, and he just falls over too fast, looks for the water, and he just leaves it a little bit long, vertical.
All right.
But the most impressive thing in an arm stand is to get that arm stand position held so you can impress those judges. And when they aren't impressed, they're bound to take off.
Here is Jeff Taylor from TCU.
Now, Jeff is going to be doing a relatively simple dive, a back 1.5 somersaults with 1.5 twists. But he's doing it off the 5 meters, so he's got a lot of spinning and twisting to do in a relatively short period of time.
Degree of difficulty 2.5 going in.
Well, for these guys, that really isn't that high of a degree of difficulty, and the judges really didn't care for it. He jumps up pretty good, gets a good strong jump, but he gets a little bit sidetracked here. As you can see, his legs are a little bit twisted as going in. We call that a cast in diving.
All right. Christian STYREN, a sophomore from the University of Texas, on his home board for his second dive.
Now, Christian's going to be doing an inward 2.5 somersaults in the pike position. That's where he's going to be bending over at the waist with his legs straight. Now, the important thing on an inward is to get far enough away from the tower that you don't hit it, but close enough that you have enough spinning action. If you back away too far, then you're in trouble.
Okay.
Now, that was a relatively good dive for Christian. He left it just a little bit short of vertical.
Let's see the scores from the judges.
Thank you.
Not great scores, but really not that bad either.
6.
Now, looking from this angle, you can see that he jumps up. He doesn't jump too far away from the tower, but he doesn't have enough spinning action going, so he can't quite make it all the way. He's really looking for that entry. He just can't get those legs around to get that vertical entry.
Here is Scott Donie for his second dive. He entered the finals as the leader.
Now, I think Scott doesn't really need this dive as much for the points as he does for his own
self-confidence.
Exactly. He will be doing a reverse 2.5 somersaults. He will jump forward and spin back towards the tower 2.5 times and tuck. Beautiful dive.
That did look nice.
Did you hear that entry?
Yes.
That's what we call the rip.
Okay, and look at those scores.
So well.
8.5.
Best scores of the night in the final so far. Let's take a look at it again.
He jumps up really strong, real confident here. He does his 2.5, kicks out, looks for the water, just lays back, has a nice long entry, and no splash. You see it right there.
Now, had he been a little more vertical straight up, he would have gotten even better scores?
Yes, he would have.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what, I know he's happy with that.
Here we go, the start of our third round.
Now, this is a big dive for Kurt. This is a back 1.5 with 3.5 twists. And I might add, I've seen Kurt hit this dive for 9s and 10s as well. So he's got it in him if he wants to really pull it out now. Now, that's a nice dive. Wasn't quite as impressive. It's kind of hard to come back after that last dive of Scott's. But those are good scores. You see the total point score at the bottom of your screen, 72 points.
7.5.
That's due to the high degree of difficulty. Now you'll see here, he gets a real strong jump off the tower. Starts in his spinning action right away, 3.5 times, 2.5, 3.5. Looks for the water, And I think the reason they took off is because he was just a little bit slightly over-twisted on that entry.
Our next diver from SMU, Doug Knight.
This will be a forward 3.5 somersaults in tuck. Now, not a bad dive. I know Doug can probably do it better. That was a nice entry, but he didn't get completely vertical. He was a little bit short of vertical. You'll see here he gets a real good strong jump off the tower. It's the one thing about Doug, he's very, very strong. He comes out a little bit too soon looking for the water, and he just didn't give himself enough time to hold on to that rotation to get that vertical entry.
All right. Bob MAUGHMER from Arkansas, his third dive.
Bob will be doing a forward 2.5 somersaults in pike position. Now, what you see there is practically the same thing that happened to Doug. He came out of his dive, his rotation, a little bit too soon and left it short of vertical. Good strong jump, keeps it going. He just got a little anxious and decided to come out too soon.
Brian Walker from Arkansas, his final dive.
Now, this is going to be another arm stand dive. This is where he's got to impress the judges with his arm stand ability. Now, as you see, he got in the water with hardly any splash, but that degree of difficulty is so low that the judges really aren't going to be that impressed. And the fact that he didn't hold that arm stand for very long.
5 1/2.
You'll see he kicks up and just lets it fall instead of showing that control on the tower, which is exactly what the judges need to see.
Freshman Joe Ogden from Arkansas. One of the nice things about diving is the creativity. The divers have choices among their dives to try.
Oh, yes, they do. Now, you have to pick a dive from each different of the dive groups.
Okay.
But as far as the degree of difficulty, you're free to be as crazy as you want to be.
There's Joe Ogden scores for his final dive.
And he jumps off forward, comes back towards the tower, kicks out, gets a really good entry, but it's like I said before, it's that feet first entry, and the judges just really don't care for that on tower.
Eric MURFF from SMU, his final try.
Now, this is a relatively good dive for Eric. It's a back 1.5 somersaults with 2.5 twists. But he really needs to hit this. Oh, beautiful.
That looks nice. That looked really nice. Good scores.
Yes, he's going to be very, very pleased with that. That was a beautiful dive.
He should move up in the rankings with
He
this.
really should. Very, very good top off the tower, looks for the water, gets in the water with no splash, and as I said before, you hear that pop, that rip entry.
Paul STABROWSKI from Arkansas.
Now, this is a very easy dive. It's only back 1.5 somersaults in pike. Like I said, most of these divers are not experienced tower divers. They're more experienced on the springboards, the 1 meter and the 3 meter.
Okay.
So that's why you're seeing a lot of these divers doing the easier dives, and they're doing them from the lower platforms. Ooh, but a very pretty dive.
Nice dive, yeah. Well, you mentioned also the 10 meter was not an event at the NCAA, so there isn't much reason to really get into it, is there?
Well, there really is a reason for these more experienced divers to get into it, because after the college season is at, they have to look forward to the indoor diving season, which is the Indoor Diving Nationals, which will be held next month.
All right. Jeff Taylor, TCU.
Now, this will be a forward 2.5 somersaults in pike. And this is going to be tough because he is doing it off the 5 meter platform, so he's got a lot of spinning to do before he hits that water. It's almost a race to see which will come first, the dive or the water.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in this case, I think the water beat him to it. You see, he didn't quite have enough time to make that vertical entry. He was just way too short, and the judges really had to take off of that. Just didn't really get those legs going, get the rotation going, came out too soon, and left it real short of vertical, so the judges really took off of that.
Christian STYREN now up.
Now Christian's going to be doing a reverse 2.5 somersaults in the tuck position. This is where he stands on the edge of the tower, jumps forward, and then reverses the action of the spin, spinning back towards the tower. This is probably one of the scariest group of dives, because every time you spin back towards the tower, you have a chance of coming around and hitting that tower. In fact, it was in 1982 that a Russian diver hit the 10-meter platform in the 10-meter platform event.
Nice
Now,
dive.
that was a very nice dive, very pretty dive. He got into the water very nice and clean.
Good score.
The judges liked it.
7, 7 1/2.
You'll see here he gets a good, strong jump off the tower. Nice spinning action, has plenty of time, kicks out, looks for the water, lays back, and has a beautiful long line of his. Gets in the water with hardly any splash at all.
Scott Donie up next. He needs a point total of about 47 on this dive to regain first place.
Now, that isn't really that much. He doesn't have to score that high of scores because he's got a 3.2 degree of difficulty on this dive. But he can't afford to blow it altogether. And I think we just saw your winner. That was beautiful.
The awards, please.
Oh, yeah. Look at that.
7 1/2.
73 points on that last dive, so he
7
easily
1/2.
takes first place.
7 1/2.
You'll see here he jumps up off the tower, spinning backwards, starts his twist immediately. 3.5 times, looks for the water, stretching, and no splash.
Beautiful dive by the freshman from SMU who captures the 10-meter diving in the Southwest Conference Championships.
Now, Scott Donie has proved that he's a very confident diver. Even though he's very young, he's very confident, and he knows how good he is.
You talked about how SMU was going to do well in this event, and they have. And, of course, once again, another booster, as we were talking with Tracy earlier. SMU doing a good job here in the Southwest Conference Swimming and Diving Championships, and I think they've got a chance to really do well in the NCAAs.
Oh, they have an excellent chance at the NCAAs, and I think Jim Stilson knows it, and he's pleased with his divers right now.
Well, let's take a look at Scott's second dive tonight in the finals, because that's the one that really clinched it.
This was the dive of the night by far. This was the most beautiful dive I've seen in this competition. This is reverse 2.5 somersaults. Real confident jump. He knows he's got this dive in his pocket. He looks back for the water and just ripped. Really ripped that dive.
Scott Donie of SMU, the champion in 10-meter diving. We'll be back with more action from the Southwest Conference Swimming and Diving Championships after these messages.